They opened the golden egg at the church raffle, and something inside was still breathing. This happened in a quiet rural town in Pennsylvania, back in April of 2013. My name is Amanda Whitaker. I was 26 then, teaching Sunday school at St. Jude's Lutheran Church. It was Easter Sunday, pastel dresses, egg hunts, and the annual raffle the church hosted to bring in the community. That year, the grand prize was a giant golden Easter egg donated anonymously. It shimmered under the church lights, and kids kept reaching for it with awe. The air smelled of lilies, polished wood, and wax candles. You could hear children laughing outside while the choir rehearsed hymns. I remember watching the egg closely. It looked wrong, not fake or plastic, but old, maybe hand-painted in gold leaf and heavier than it should have been. When I shook it, something inside shifted. Not rattled, shifted. I approached Pastor Green about it. He said it was likely a ceramic centerpiece with a small gift inside. But he didn't look convinced. I saw how he eyed the egg during the sermon, like it was watching him. I remember a strange woman standing at the back of the church, tall, pale, in a faded blue dress. She didn't blink. When I greeted her, she just smiled and walked away. No one else claimed to have seen her. The raffle was set for 3 p.m. after the Easter service. The winner was a boy named Caleb. He was only 9. When they handed him the golden egg, he smiled wide for the cameras. But then he froze, eyes wide. He whispered, "It's breathing." People laughed, thinking it was just nerves. But when he opened the egg, he didn't scream. He just dropped it. It didn't shatter. It cracked, like porcelain. A thick, tar-like substance oozed out, reeking of sulfur and wet soil. And inside was a small, shriveled thing, curled like a fetus, but with rabbit ears and human fingers. The lights flickered. Someone vomited. Pastor Green tried to gather everyone and calm the room. But then Caleb collapsed. He wouldn't wake up. When the ambulance came, they said his vitals were fine, just like he was in a deep, unbreakable sleep. Over the next 48 hours, strange things began to happen. The egg, what was left of it, was locked in the church office, but the tar kept spreading. It stained the floorboards, crawled up the walls. One of the church staff, Evelyn, found a rabbit nailed to the side of her barn. A real rabbit, skinned, with tiny symbols carved into its flesh. Then Evelyn disappeared. Her car was still parked outside her home, her keys on the counter, but she was gone. Her son Travis said he saw her walking barefoot in the woods behind their house, following a man in a rabbit mask. Over the next week, 3 more people who had touched the egg fell into comas, all unresponsive, and every single one of them had nightmares once awoke. Those who did wake, Caleb never did. They described being hunted by a thing with a cracked porcelain face and long rabbit ears, dragging a basket made of teeth. A deep voice chanting in some guttural language followed them through each dream. They couldn't remember the words, only that the chant made their bones feel cold. The town called in a folklorist from Penn State, Dr. Lena Roth. She recognized the egg's design from Eastern European pagan traditions, specifically something tied to a forgotten Hungarian rite, the Nyúlvár, the blood rabbit, a spirit bound each spring in a golden vessel and sealed with a child's heartbeat. Every century the ritual was said to fail, and something woke. We buried the egg under the church, sealed in concrete, layered with salt and consecrated earth. Pastor Green disappeared shortly after, Some say he went mad. Others say he followed the same woman I saw in the blue dress. Her image appeared in the stained glass window weeks later. No one could explain how, but last year, something tunneled up through the floorboards. They still hear scratching under the pews every Easter Sunday. Let me tell you about the next story. It's about resurrection game. Listen attentive to this. She thought it was just an Easter prank until the people she buried started coming back. My name is David Kepler, and what I'm about to share happened in the town of Ferndale, Montana, back in 2002. It's a place where everyone knows your name, where the church bell still rings every Sunday morning, and where nothing much ever happens until that Easter. I was a sophomore in high school, and that year, the local youth group started something they called the Resurrection Game. It was supposed to be an interactive mystery, kind of like a scavenger hunt with religious overtones. The kids loved it. You'd be given a plastic egg with a clue, and if you followed the clues right, you'd end up finding a hidden, resurrected soul. The twist? One kid from the group would volunteer to be the soul. They'd lie in a shallow grave. Nothing dangerous, just a symbolic ritual in someone's backyard. Harmless fun, right? But the game started to change after the third round. It was Lisa Merrill's turn to be buried. She was 15, bright, funny, always cracking jokes. Her parents agreed to let her take part, and her best friend Carly was the one who buried her. 2 feet down, just enough to be creepy, not enough to be dangerous. She had an oxygen tube and a flashlight just in case. The problem is, Lisa didn't come back. They dug her up after 20 minutes, laughing, ready to surprise her. But the grave was empty. The flashlight was still on. The oxygen tube still pumping air. Lisa was gone. At first, everyone thought it was a prank, but then her phone was found 2 miles away in an abandoned barn. The screen was cracked and smeared with blood. Photos were still on it, blurry images of something watching her from the trees. Carly swore she'd heard whispering during the burial. Not Lisa's voice, something lower, guttural, a language she didn't understand. She said the dirt moved. 2 days later, Lisa walked back into town, but she wasn't the same. She was barefoot, covered in mud, eyes glassy. She didn't speak for hours. When she finally did, her voice was deeper, like she was speaking from a cave. She said only one thing: the veil is torn. That night, 3 other kids who'd been part of the game went missing. Their graves empty. The town went into lockdown. The church held emergency services, but the pastor's body was found behind the altar, his chest torn open, a plastic egg shoved into his mouth. Inside the egg, teeth. Lisa died a week later. Her body crumbled like dry leaves. Doctors couldn't explain it. No organs, just dust. The game hasn't been played since, but every Easter, someone still finds an egg in their mailbox. No return address. Inside, a name and a time. What would you have done in her place? Story 3, the choir beneath the crypt. They sang, "He is risen," but something else rose with the hymn. This happened in 1998 in the town of Black Hollow, Maine. I was 17 years old, part of the youth choir at Our Lady of Mercy Church. We were known across the county for our Easter performances, elaborate candlelit processions, haunting hymns in Latin, and the crypt choir. The crypt was under the church, a stone-walled chamber that hadn't been opened for decades. But that year, the new bishop, Father Silvano insisted we revive an old Easter tradition, singing the resurrection hymn down in the crypt at midnight on Holy Saturday. He called it a voice for the forgotten, said it was a way to honor those buried beneath us. Most of the choir was excited. It felt dramatic, sacred, even a little spooky. But our choir director, Ms. Holloway, looked troubled. I overheard her telling Father Silvano it was sealed for a reason. That night, the 12 of us descended the narrow spiral staircase with candles in hand. The air grew colder with every step. The crypt hadn't been cleaned. Dust lay thick over the marble floor, and the smell of mold and stone filled our lungs. And then we began to sing. The hymn echoed in ways it shouldn't have. Voices overlapped that didn't belong to anyone. The acoustics twisted the sound. It started subtly, a strange harmony, then something that felt like a low growl weaving between the lyrics. Midway through the song, Lydia, a soprano, screamed. Her candle had gone out. She said she saw a face, pale, eyeless, pressed against one of the stone coffins. We tried to calm her, but one by one, our candles began to flicker. Father Silvano insisted we finish the hymn. He said, "We must complete the verse. All of it, or they'll know we're afraid." That's when the stone coffins began to open. Not all of them, just one. The lid slid with a grinding shriek. A figure sat up slowly, skin like parchment, robed in priestly garments centuries old. It opened its mouth and sang with us. Perfect pitch, eyes sunken but locked on me. We ran, or tried to. Lydia fell and hit her head. 2 boys carried her as we scrambled up the stairs, the hymn still echoing behind us, growing louder. The doors to the sanctuary were locked. Father Silvano remained behind, said he had to finish what he started, said the thing in the coffin was the first bishop of Black Hollow. He had been entombed with a vow to rise only if the church forgot the old rites. We watched through the barred entrance as Father Silvano kneeled. The figure touched his forehead. A burst of light engulfed them both. When the doors finally gave, the crypt was empty. Only soot and wax remained. No bishop, no Silvano. Ms. Holloway disappeared that week, and every Easter since, at exactly midnight, the hymn plays by itself through the old pipe organ, even when it's not powered. Last year, we found fresh footprints in the crypt dust. Some say the choir never left. Let me tell you about the next story. It's called the Sunday dress. Every Easter, she wore her daughter's favorite dress. The only problem was, her daughter had been buried in it. It was Easter Sunday, 2005, in the small Mississippi town of Carver's Ridge. My Aunt Mabel was the kind of woman who believed in family, faith, and forgiveness, even when life gave her every reason not to. 6 years earlier, she had lost her only daughter, June, in a tragic fire the night before Easter. June had just turned 9. The only thing recovered from the ashes was a scorched porcelain cross and the remains of the dress she was buried in, pale pink with white lace and tiny stitched lilies. Aunt Mabel kept a replica of it, sewed it herself down to every thread. She called it the Sunday dress. Every year she'd put it out on the bed. Every year she'd hum the old hymns June used to sing, but this year was different. She wore the dress herself. It looked wrong, too small, clinging to her like it wanted out. She sat in the front pew of St. Mark's Methodist, silent. People whispered, said she looked younger, tighter skin, brighter eyes. Her voice, when she sang, was high and unfamiliar, like a child's. That night, the lights in her house stayed on until dawn. I saw her dancing alone in the living room when I drove by, spinning with her arms out like a little girl. Then the calls started. Neighbors said they heard two voices coming from her house, both singing lullabies. Some saw a second shadow in the kitchen window, smaller, holding her hand. And then came the eggs. Hundreds of them, hand-painted, started appearing in people's yards, all identical, all pink, with a little cross and the letter J inside each, a tuft of blonde hair. I confronted her the night before Easter Monday. She opened the door in the dress again, but it wasn't just tight, it was tearing at the seams. Her face was half wrinkled, half smooth. Her voice came in two tones, one Mabel's, one June's. She said she missed Easter. That wasn't fair, so I let her back in. The house was covered in drawings, crayon scrawls, family stick figures, all dated April 23rd, 1999, the day June died. I tried to leave, but the door locked on its own, and behind me I heard a child's giggle. The lights flickered. The radio turned on, playing June's favorite hymn. Up from the grave he arose. Aunt Mabel started to sing. So did another voice, from the walls. When the town finally broke in the next day, she was gone. The dress lay crumpled on the floor. The house was empty, except for a single Easter basket placed in the middle of the room. Inside it were two teeth, one adult, one child. No one has worn the Sunday dress since. The hair in the graveyard. This is very tough, but pay attention, my fans, and make sure you're already subscribed. They say the Easter Bunny brings joy, but the one I saw was dragging something into the grave. Back in 2012, I was working part-time at a cemetery in Dunmore Hills, Kentucky. Nothing glamorous, mostly clearing brush, resetting gravestones, and prepping for the town's annual Easter sunrise service. They'd gather by the big willow tree just as the sun came up, singing hymns while kids placed daffodils on the graves. That year, something changed. The ground started giving way in one of the older lots. Graves from the 1800s. Not uncommon. Heavy rains can shift things. But what we found wasn't erosion. It was a tunnel. Narrow, jagged, like something had dug up from below. And there were tracks, not human, not quite animal. I joked to my supervisor, "Looks like the Easter Bunny's coming early." He didn't laugh. He said, "That's not funny, not here." I started noticing the rabbits. At first just one, white with black eyes, then three, then dozens. They'd gather by the old willow every morning, still, watching. At night, I'd hear scratching outside my trailer, like claws against metal. I set up a trail cam. The next morning, the footage was gone, deleted from the card. But the screen had one frozen frame left behind. A white hair, standing, upright, holding something long and sharp. I thought I was losing it, until I followed the sound of digging one night. It led me to a fresh grave, open, dirt everywhere. Inside, a body that wasn't supposed to be buried there. It was dressed in an Easter Bunny costume. I called the sheriff. When they arrived, the body was gone, but the soil still held paw prints and drag marks. They thought I staged it, gave me a warning, told me to get sleep. That Easter Sunday, the crowd gathered under the willow. Everything looked normal until a child screamed. One of the plastic eggs hidden near the grave had something inside it. Not candy, not toys. A finger, human, still warm. They canceled the service. Parents scrambled. The sheriff sealed off the area. But I saw them again that night. The rabbits, watching from the fence line, digging slowly, rhythmically. One stood tallest, its ears torn, one eye missing, and in its paw it held a piece of fabric, stained pink, with lace. No one hosts Easter sunrise at Dunmore Hills anymore, but the digging hasn't stopped. Nah. Murray. Story 6. The Lamb's Eyes. This real-life story will teach you a lot, listeners. They brought the lamb to Sunday school as part of the Easter lesson, but it wasn't the same lamb the next morning. In spring 2009, I volunteered at Calvary Baptist Church in Lincoln, Nebraska. Easter was always a big deal there. The pageant, the egg hunt, the youth skit. But that year, they introduced something new. Pastor Tom's wife had an idea for the Sunday school class. Live animals, a miniature petting zoo. Teach the kids about the Lamb of God, she said. So on Palm Sunday, a farmer delivered a tiny, snow-white lamb, no bigger than a beagle, with soft wool and the gentlest bleat. The children adored it. They called it Benny. But that night, Benny wouldn't stop crying. I offered to take Benny home for the week. Figured he'd calm down. I had a small shed out back, hay laid out, everything ready. First night, I heard scratching, not hooves, nails. By the third night, I found the shed door open. Benny stood upright, completely still, eyes wide, no whites, just black, like marbles. The next morning, there were scratches on the inside of the back door. My crucifix had fallen from the wall. My cat was missing. And Benny, he wasn't eating, but his mouth was always wet. Maundy Thursday, I woke to silence. Went out to check. Benny was gone. The back gate splintered. I followed the trail, muddy hoof prints mixed with something else. Bare feet, small. They led to the church. The sanctuary lights were on, and there, in the middle aisle, sat Benny. But not the Benny I knew. His wool had turned gray. His mouth hung open, bleeding. His eyes, they blinked sideways. And in his mouth was my cat's collar. I backed away. But behind me, every door slammed shut. The stained glass windows darkened. The cross above the altar fell, shattering at my feet. Then Benny spoke. Not a voice, just sound. Dozens of children screaming, all in reverse. I passed out. When I woke, it was Easter morning. The lamb was gone. No one believed me. But the Sunday school room was covered in red paint. The words written over and over, "Worthy is the Lamb that was slain." I never stepped foot in Calvary Baptist again, but I still hear that backwards screaming every time I close my eyes on Easter night. Story 7. The Buried Choir of Elderbrook. The Easter pageant ended in silence because every single member of the children's choir was buried alive beneath the church. The town of Elderbrook, Pennsylvania, is one of those blink and you miss it places, nestled in the Appalachian Hills, shrouded in thick woods, and coated in silence even on the busiest days. Only a few hundred people lived there by 2010, mostly retirees and farmers, but the real heart of the town was always the chapel. Elderbrook First Assembly stood at the very edge of town. Built in 1897, It was all creaking wood and stained glass, topped with a rusting bell that hadn't rung in decades. What drew people in every Easter was the pageant. Generations of townsfolk had passed through it, acting out the resurrection in dramatic fashion. But the true highlight was always the children's choir. That year I was directing the pageant for the first time. I'd grown up in Elderbrook, moved away, but came back to care for my father after his stroke. When the pastor asked me to step in for the pageant, I agreed. There were 23 kids in the choir, all sweet, all under 12. One of them was my niece, Addie. She had a voice like wind through pine. We began rehearsals on March 12th. By March 19th, I knew something was wrong. It began with the voices. We'd be in the sanctuary practicing, and I'd hear a second harmony, low, breathy, and off-key. Not the kids, something underneath them. At first, I blamed the church's acoustics, but it wasn't echo. It was something else, as if another group were singing from under the floorboards. Then came the missing pages. Sheet music vanished overnight. Reappeared rewritten, different keys, unfamiliar Latin lyrics scrawled in what looked like charcoal. One page read only, non resurget. Non resurget. My niece began sleepwalking. Her mother found her standing in the garden at 3 a.m., hands raised to the sky, humming hymns no one had taught her. The Friday before Easter, we found the trap door. It was in the old storage room behind the sanctuary, beneath a moldy carpet, hidden under crates of broken pews. No one remembered it being there. It led to a tunnel, narrow, brick-lined, damp. Candles lined the walls, freshly burned. At the end was a wooden room. In the center, a small stage, and behind it, 23 tiny coffins. We told the pastor. He laughed it off, said it was an old Civil War burial crypt. That Easter Sunday, the children performed beautifully. Their voices soared, but just before the final note, the power cut out. Pitch black, then a whisper, non, resurgit, screams, children crying, parents shouting. We found all 23 kids unconscious behind the pulpit. They were breathing, eyes open, but unresponsive, as if frozen. We called ambulances, but every single child was diagnosed as comatose, with no signs of trauma. The police reopened the trapdoor that night, but the tunnel was gone, just dirt and stone, like it had never been there. Addie never woke up. She died 5 years later, never speaking again. The last time I visited her, I heard her humming in the hospital bed, that same off-key Latin hymn. No children have performed in Elderbrook since, and the choir room has been sealed shut. But every Easter Sunday at exactly 9:47 a.m., the time the children collapsed, the chapel speakers turn on. No power, no signal, just voices, 23 of them, singing something only the dead should know.
Now, you've heard the 7 true terrifying tales of Easter, but those were just the beginning. There are stories buried deeper, darker truths hidden in plain sight, whispers from inside church walls, abandoned towns that vanish every Good Friday, footage of hunts that ended in blood instead of candy, and they're coming. The next stories will make you question everything you believe about innocence, tradition, and faith itself. So, if you're brave enough to return, stay close, stay listening, and remember, the real horror begins after the resurrection. Make sure you subscribe and click your notification button. We'll see you in the next collection, if you're still awake by then.